Hey, and for everybody who's going to be tuning into this at a later time and date, I've got a very special guest with me today. This is Ken Taylor. I am president of Commercial Truck Training, and we're the one company in America that's devoted exclusively to the fleet and commercial business. And this guy next to me, wait a minute, next to me is AJ Hewitson, the Director of Fleet and Commercial Operations at Paradise Chevrolet in Temecula, California. AJ, welcome to the Extra Mile.
Thank you. Thank you. Pleasure.
Always good to have you, man. And I have to say, AJ is one of my longest term friends in this business. You went to one of my very first training programs.
Way back when, 17 years ago.
Yeah, we won't tell how many. Even though I won't mention the word 20. Oh, I mentioned it. I'm sorry. The reason that I actually asked AJ's been a guest before on our program, and I asked him to join us again because he has so many unique perspectives to the business, and I think I've learned a lot more from him than he's ever learned from me. So we're going to keep that going. Oh, man. So again, AJ, welcome, and tell us a little bit about the Paradise Fleet Commercial Operation.
So we're located in Temecula, which for those of you that have never heard of it, other than seeing the movie with Jeremy Piven, The Goods, the used car movie, we're about an hour away from San Diego, LA, and Riverside County, and Orange County. So we're like right in the middle of a bunch of different major metros, and so you pass by us, when you're going in between one or the other. So we got a great location. We have a fairly strong Chevy Cadillac store, and then we have a really good commercial department. But there's a lot of Indian casinos out here. There's a ton of wineries out here. There's a lot of commerce and travel within a short distance. There's a lot of agriculture, a ton of building. They've got probably a good 1,500 to 2,000 homes that they're going to be building over the next 3 to 5 years. So a lot of construction going on out here. And it's been a built-up community for the last 15, 20 years. They've built something like 20,000 homes. So it's crazy.
Oh, outstanding. Do something for me, because I think it's so fascinating. Give our listeners a little bit about your background and kind of how you got into the fleet and commercial business.
Sure. So I had a background. I used to sell insurance. I did commercial and general liability insurance, and then went to go work in the family business for a while, and in retail, and I could only stand so many years of that. And then the long hours and the craziness, and then I came back to San Diego, and I ended up working for Nextel way back when, and back when they had the walkie-talkie radio phones, and a lot of those customers were contractor customers, because they used them as their main way of talking to each other. And so then I started going to different dealerships, because at the time Nextel had a special pay plan for dealerships that were General Motors. And so I just would walk into these different stores and offer them, hey, I could save you money on your current plan. And then one of the dealerships, one of the used car managers says, hey, you really need to talk to the guys over in commercial. And I had no idea what he was talking about. And obviously we've all seen cargo vans and trucks on the road, but we don't really pay attention to it until we start selling them.
Right.
So I had a conversation with them and had a couple of dealings with them, and it kind of just broke down to the manager just saying, hey, who's your typical customer? And I said, well, a lot of contractors and stuff. And he said, well, how'd you like to have the same customer, and instead of selling $40 phones, you'll sell $40,000 trucks? And I said, well, I don't know anything about that. And he goes, well, neither do most of my guys, but they do okay. So that was my first introduction into the business.
Well, you've done very well. I refer to you so often when I'm speaking at seminars about this guy who sold phones, and now he's killing it selling trucks. So you are my example. So way to go. Well, one thing I'm kind of really excited about in today's podcast, and you and I had a conversation, and you were talking about CoOp funds. And one of the big complaints I get from General Motors is, gosh, over 80% of our dealers don't even use half their CoOp money.
Right.
And it's just sitting there, and it's just absolutely amazing. You've done quite well with it, and you've got a unique approach. Would you share that with us today?
Well, and actually, I love when dealers don't spend it because we kind of tend to try to overspend, and at the end of each quarter or half year, when it comes time, we're hitting up GM to ask them, hey, is there any other dealers that haven't spent their money? And a lot of times it just goes unspent. So not unlike municipal money, if they don't get their budget spent, then they get a cut budget next year. So it's their responsibility to get dealers to to go through as much as they can, because if they don't, then they're not gonna get anything out of it, and so they're really pushing hard to have the money being spent. So that's the first part of it. And then as far as spending the money itself, we try to just think of different ways to. I mean, everyone's done flyers and mailers and uh, you know brochures and that kind of stuff, but that's really kind of played out at this point. Now you've got a lot of people that are digital, and the paper market is just, it's brutal. As soon as you send out
Yeah.
the collateral stuff, it's already expired. The rebates are
Right.
done. And so my biggest request I've had from salespeople over so many years is that give me some timeless marketing materials, and just give me some stuff that doesn't have a date on it and doesn't have a price on it. And the price is going to change. The price could change from today to tomorrow anyway. So you don't want to get caught. You want it to be an advantage and not a disadvantage piece. So that's one thing, is to have brochures. The other thing is digital. We've been doing a lot of advertising on Facebook and other social media, and there's a lot of dealers that just don't do it. And what's crazy is that there's dealers that spend thousands of dollars every month to be on Commercial Truck Trader and be on various sites, and they
Right.
have stock photos. And it's like, they don't even, like, why are you spending the thousands of dollars to show a stock photo that's not even the real truck? I mean, if anything, it just creates more angst and
Absolutely.
pandemonium amongst your sales team and your customers.
Absolutely. And it's funny because we go on sales calls, with dealers, and it's how one of the questions I sometimes ask if we've got a lot of rapport going was, what are some of the complaints you have about, how dealers advertise? One of the biggest answers I get, AJ, is, well, I hate it when they put those stock photos up. I
Right,
mean, they
right.
even recognize it. And so it's just absolutely crazy. So, what have been the results of the money that you spent? It sounds like more toward internet based marketing versus the traditional way. How has that gone for you?
Well, it's funny. I wish that I had enough time to really spend the time, to do it as much as I could and should. And we're all complaining about just not having enough time, right? That's the one commodity that you never get back. I had a really good mentor that said, you could have all the money in the world, you could lose it all. And most of the, successful people have lost it all, but time you never get back. And, the biggest thing that I see is not just advertising online, but also looking at the data. And I've spent, probably 2 hours this morning going back and forth with my success coach at Work Truck Solutions, which those folks are amazing. Like they've made my life just so much. It's so much easier because they've got a whole team that's there, and they're begging to give us more work, give us more things that we could do to help you win. And you just don't typically get vendors like that. They're usually like,
Yeah,
that's going to cost an extra $100, or that's going to cost another
right.
$1,000. And so when you come back with a success story, they're always willing to try to come up with some kind of deal or package or something. And if you don't do anything with the data, then you're really, I mean, yeah, you're going to sell some vehicles and you'll get some low hanging fruit. But if you don't do something with the data, then it's kind of pointless. So like one of the things that I really like from Work Truck Solutions is that you get a top 10 list of searched items like body types. You get a top 10 list of stock numbers, of the most common viewed stock numbers. So then I look at that at the end of each month and I go, okay, so out of these 10, why did this one get 700 hits and it's still here? Why did this one get 1,400 hits and it's still here? Then you
Right.
look at your CRM and you start looking at, how many salespeople worked a deal on it. And then if, God forbid, they didn't, enter anything in the CRM, which that's a whole other, conversation. So data is amazing. And it's one thing to get a lot of hits. I think last month we had, something like, I think 20,000 hits to our commercial site, and that's awesome. And a bounce rate, which is basically how many people come to your site and then just bail, We had a bounce rate in some of our advertising stuff that was less than 50%, which in commercial, you're usually seeing 70, 80, 90%,
Right.
which means that people are clicking on your site, you're paying the money to whatever the vendor was for them to come to your site, and then you're getting nothing out of it because they bail. And so if you don't look at that stuff and if you don't understand it, then you need to get a vendor that's going to explain it. And if they can't explain it, then you need a new vendor. I mean, that's just it. I mean,
Amen. You are so dead on that. We go into stores and we'll ask those questions because we're a big proponent of two things, both commercial truck trader as well as work truck solutions. And a lot of people use both. But the one thing that I find out with work truck solutions is they think it's a plug and play. Okay, we've got it. Now we just sit back and wait for something to happen.
Right.
And as you and I both know, that's not going to get you very far.
No, not at all. And the worst part is, there's some things that we've done where we've been able to really take advantage, and we advertise in other dealers' backyards all the time where there's a void of inventory. So like we'll search, like if right now we've got probably 70 plumber bodies. So when we've got 70 plumber bodies, we're going to look for places that don't have any plumber bodies, and guaranteed we're going to get phone calls and internet leads for where they don't have that inventory. And it doesn't matter if you're Ford, Ram, Chevy, you can easily run locates and see what's out there. Now it's going to be a little tricky to see what bodies are on them, but you could do with a little bit of work, make your dollars stretch. And we get a fraction of on the fleet side, we get a fraction of budget compared to what they get on the retail side. We'll get over $100,000 a month in co-op advertising on the retail side, where we get $30,000 to $40,000 a year on the fleet side. So we have to really make that stuff work. So, anyways, at the end of the day, it just boils down to we really have to do a yeoman's task of making that dollar turn into $100, because every dollar that we spend, we're going to get the GM or the dealer coming back to us going, okay, so how did that dollar convert? And if you don't know the information, if you don't have the data, if you don't have a good vendor that makes you look good, then you're going to be caught flat-footed, and it's going to be a first and last opportunity that you're going to get from your dealer, because they're just not going to give you the money anymore.
Thank you. You got to use it wisely. And that's what you've done such a good job. So typical dealer, and we see and we get calls. I was in a dealership last week in Chicago. Typical dealer, if they could do, and this is kind of off a little bit of what we talked about, if they could do just 3 or 4 things they would get the biggest impact in order to grow their business, what would you suggest they do?
I mean, for someone that's just starting out,
Just starting out, yeah.
Well, I mean, the thing that's nice about social media is that if your budget's $500, $5,000, $50,000, whatever it is, you can be very incremental. And when you go into Facebook, you can, like, for example, you can pick what kind of audience you want. You can pick what location you want. You could pick, if there's you can get so incremental on it. And then once the campaign is launched, you can check it. I mean, I could look at it right now and I could see, like specifically, right, I wasn't planning on doing this, but I almost I'm a little apprehensive on sharing all the tricks here, but
well, you don't have to give us all of it.
but basically, like, here's an ad set that I've got that, and I don't know how well you can really see it.
I can see it. Oh yeah.
It says,
let me start writing.
Yeah. But then when you go into there, you can actually look at, how well, like, here's a picture of the ad, that's on there. And then you can see how it's performing, and it shows you, like, here's, cost per click. I don't know if you can see that. And so
you reach over 21,000 in reach.
Right. And so, so I have 1,000 link clicks. For women, my click is, 17 cents each. For men, it's 18 cents, which is surprising because usually the men are a lot less expensive because there's a lot more, men in contracting. But the part that's really interesting when you look at, and once again, I don't know how well you can really see this.
Yeah.
But if you look at the amount of men, that are clicking versus women,
oh gosh, yeah.
You've got 320,000 reached on the men and 43,000 reached on the women. So then, I mean, as you go through here, at any point, if you look at the top of the screen there, on the top right, there's a blue slider.
Yeah.
If that ad's not performing, I mean, just very easily, I just tap that and turn off the ad. If I were to reconfigure it, I can do that. And you don't have to wait. Like, that's the one drawback with conventional marketing, is that when you do print, you don't know if that mailer is going to work or not. You just are, fingers crossed, hoping, rubbing the lucky lamp and doing everything and hoping that, that you did it all right. And it may have worked and it may not. And by that time, it's already, I mean, you can't be half pregnant. You're either there or you're not. With this, you could launch a campaign on Tuesday. If it's not working the way that you like it by Friday, you just shut it off and reallocate your money and keep going. So once again, that goes back to time, though, and how good your vendors are and what they're willing to do. So some vendor, you might pay a little bit more to have someone watching this for you. It's worth every penny, because you're just stretching those dollars as much as you can.
You've just opened up a whole new world to probably 90% of the dealers who are going to be listening and viewing this, because and what I love about you is you approach everything from a very analytical perspective. You're not just going to jump in and use Work Truck Solutions. You're going to figure out how to use it to the max. I mean, that's what I've always loved about you, is you've got that analytical ability. And if you're going to do it, you're going to do it right. So I commend you on that. I mean,
and don't get stuck into paralysis from analysis either, because you can really dig. You can get that shovel and dig deep, and then you're overhead with dirt on top of you, and it's like, yeah, I got all this great data, but you didn't do anything to act on it. So like the G.I. Joe motto, knowing is half the battle. It's like that. What are you going to do after I mean, then you got to do it.
Taking action.
And I'm not, I mean, perfect by any stretch. I mean, that's my biggest obstacle is, taking on too much. Is, you got to make time to be able to actually do something with it. And it's tough. You're dealing with body companies, you're dealing with the manufacturers not building the trucks, you're dealing with, dealer trades not going the way that you need to, missing keys, missing owner's manuals, credit lines. And I mean, there's so many things that we juggle that we just have, that people knew. When you ask about people that are new in the business, I mean, start up a habit of alcoholism, because you're gonna need it. You're gonna need a big bottle of some kind of grain alcohol. That's for sure.
You recommend the hard stuff then?
Yeah. Don't mess around with beer and IPAs. I mean, you just got to go with the clear stuff that's flammable. That's good.
Oh man. Well, I guess I'll be sitting out back with my wife in a little while, sipping wines.
Exactly.
maybe I better revert to something a little bit stronger.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, that is awesome. Well, great tips, and thank you for sharing that and how that's used. That's going to be monumental for a lot of people who are going to be listening. We have so many new dealerships to commercial and fleet, and so many new people to commercial and fleet. And we preach the things that you're talking about, not just having Work Truck Solutions, but utilizing and using it and analyzing the data. It's incredible. Any more last minute tips before I kind of change directions here?
No, I mean, I think that, ultimately, there's a lot to dig into, and, and when it comes to vendors, there's so many experts out there that, that are going to tell you, everything that, that they think that you need to know, and all these things, and I would definitely, get a couple. I mean, like, Work Truck Solutions is a great resource, but if you're going to go outside of the vehicle industry, and one thing that's really nice about, Catherine and her team there is that that's all they do, is they live in commercial trucks. And so if you get someone who's an expert, just like when websites first became popular and you pay someone, $2,500 to build a web page for you. Well, what you didn't realize is that they built that exact same web page for a shoe store, for a clothing store, for an auto body shop, for this, and all they did was just change the pictures. I mean, all the architecture was all the same, but you didn't know anything about it. So you just wrote the check for $2,500 or sometimes more. And, the web developers were the ones that made all the money on it. Hopefully you got some return. Yeah. It's gotten a lot different now. And so get a couple different quotes, ask some good questions, and then use those questions to ask questions to the next vendor. It's just like when you're getting a quote on a pool or on a remodel of your house. I mean, every one of them is going to bring up different points, and don't just fall in love with the first one that promises all these great, return on investments and stuff, because it's just not real. I mean, it just isn't, and you're going to have to do some work too. So don't just think
Yeah.
that just because you paid, $5,000 to somebody that, that they're going to follow up on your leads and they're going to do all this stuff. I mean, at the end of the day, they're just trying to drive traffic to you, and then you've got to do everything from there.
Outstanding. Well, any any particular advice to the commercial managers out there? I mean, you're kind of a jack of all trades. I mean, there's so much you have to do. If you could just pick out two or three things for the commercial managers who are listening that can help them grow, because you guys have done a great job, and you've got, I've been with your guys, and you and I have been on sales calls together. The one thing that I'm so impressed is you provide such a center of knowledge for all your guys. They can depend on you for almost anything. You've really learned this business. What would you say to commercial managers who are looking to, motivate their people or grow the business?
Well, depending on the size of your department, like if you've got just one or two guys, then that's something that you should be able to manage on your own. If you've got 3, 4, or more guys, you're definitely going to need some, a good right hand, to help you. Rich, he's been in the business longer than I have, and he was in the truck body business before that. So to have, two different people, and we definitely have two different personalities and two different, I mean, I'm definitely more technical with technology and more of the sales science of things, where he's more old school and it's a handshake and a relationship, which I'm all about relationships as well. We just manage it differently, so you have to identify like what your own strengths are first, figure out like if you're which guy you are you, I mean, and Walt McGrath, a shout out, is actually Rich's brother. Walt was best man at my wedding, and I've known him since the day I started. I actually ran into him on sales calls by mistake. And I was going into all the customers he was going into after he'd go. And then he like cornered me in the parking lot. And he's like, dude, what are you doing? And I'm like, going to see customers. He goes, you're going to see my customers. What are you doing? So, but one of the things that Walt and I joke about is that I'm CD and he's cassette. And this business is really CD and cassette. And there's a lot of new people coming in that are more CD than cassette. And a lot of people that don't even know what a cassette is, and those are definitely the CD people.
Unfortunately, I do.
Right. And the thing is that, like I said, you learn your strengths and you just focus on those things. I'd say, from a manager perspective, small goals, because like expecting, and this is a real challenge for me also, and I struggle with it daily. Managing outcomes is very difficult. To say that I want you to sell 20 a month or 10 a month or 50, whatever that number is. But you can easily, and you talk about this also, you can manage activities all day long.
Absolutely.
All day long. And so you can tell them, that, hey, I want you to see X amount of people. I want you to make X amount of phone calls. I want you to see X amount of old customers and X amount of new customers. And in this COVID environment, it's tough because if you're just getting into this business and you can't see people face to face, you have to be pretty amazing to steal that customer away from somebody else, because there aren't a lot of people that are changing vendors in any capacity. And now it's just a matter of who has the truck in some cases, and we've sold and stolen some customers away from other dealers just because of the inventory that we've had. And I mean, and some salesmanship obviously as well, but
sure.
If I've got the gold, I'm going to make the rules. And I mean, that's just is what it is. So, manageable, things to manage the activities, and the outcomes will come. We have an average close ratio in this industry of about 30%. So if you see 10 customers, you're going to sell 3 of them, as long as you stay on top. And if you don't and you see them once, then someone else is going to close them. You're just going to be one more, step for them to be closer to buying from somebody. Not necessarily you, but from somebody. And don't be that stepping stone to someone else's sale. And then that other salesman walks in. The customers already had all the education from the previous salesperson, but because it wasn't low-hanging fruit, they bailed. And then the next guy that walks in with blood in his veins and breath in his lungs gets the sale. He thinks he's God's gift to sales because it was a first visit close. Meanwhile, the other guy wasn't even paying attention. And then when they show up later, they come back and they have the, oh, you did. Oh, you already bought? Oh, you did? And that's
worst words you can hear.
Right.
But you just hit on literally everything we teach. It's all about activity, and then I tell people it's all about quality activity. I mean, knowing what you're doing, having an agenda, following up. that is one of the biggest weaknesses we see when we do a coaching call. I'll be on a coaching call tomorrow with a client, and we hammer him about following up, and I hope he has some good information for me.
Well, in sales, and like you got to have some relevant, some new relevant stuff. I mean, yeah, it's great that you go and you follow up, but just showing your face 3 times over 30 days is, the first time was informational and a little bit of a nuisance because you showed up probably without an appointment. The second time, if you brought some good relevant information, okay, then you get a pass for the second one, and then hopefully you're asking for an appointment for the third. And if you do show up the third time without an appointment, or fourth, or however many times it is, if you're just irritating the gatekeeper, now they just want you out of the office. But if you could bring some relevant information or stuff about the fleet or stuff about order cutoff or, advantages of these new trucks versus the old trucks or safety or whatever, fuel savings or something important, then at least you kind of have permission to come in. Beyond that, you just don't. I mean, right. You don't.
And you hit it. You don't get past the gatekeeper if you don't have value to bring. Right. Then you don't get past the gatekeeper, or they'll find reasons not to give you your second or third appointment. So right. Thank you. You are dead on. AJ, it's story time. I want to know, over your history, one of your big wins that you really worked really hard to get.
There's one that comes right to mind, and I mean, this is a big profit deal, but it was a plumbing contractor that wanted to get, he wanted to try something different. He wanted to get plumber trucks, but he didn't want them on cutaways. And this was back when we sold, W series Isuzus the first time around before we were gone for 10 years. But this was back in probably 08, I think it was. And so the guy wanted, first it was 1, and then we talked him into 2, and then he was just leaving another company and he wanted to start his own business. And so he had good credit, he had good assets, and he had some, some good equity, so we were able to do it. But we ended up, turning 2 into 6, 14-foot plumber trucks on Isuzu chassis, and they were C-Tech bodies, and they were all custom and tricked out. And then on top of it, we added a whole bunch of extra equipment to get started in the business that were truck-mounted equipment and jetters and all kinds of stuff in there. So really, you could just pay, and we track leased the whole thing, which track leasing was a it still continues to be a great opportunity to for the customer to manage their revenue stream, for us to be able to get more out of a sale with less outlay of cash from the customer, and then having a residual at the end lowers your monthly payment. So it just made it really good. So we penciled out that the guy, his guys were going to average about $20,000 to $30,000 a month in gross profit. And then we, figured out that the trucks were going to cost about, $5,000 a month, but they were fully loaded, ready to go with tools and materials and everything. So to be able to parlay all that tool equipment over 3-4 years, instead of having to come cash out of pocket to spend 30 grand, 40 grand on top of it right out of the gate, that was just a big, thing. And then we did his signage, and we did everything included in the trucks. So, it was an easy sell, once we penciled it out and said, okay, well, if you're going to get 30 and you're going to net about 25 to 30% net after all expenses, that's $7,500, a month, that's, net cash, and so you figure these are going to be a tax write-off and the benefit. It was just great. And so it ended up being about a $300,000 sale when it was all said and done. Because they were about 50. I think actually it was over 300, because it was about $55,000-$60,000 per truck, and there were 6 of them, so it was over 300,000. So we were stoked the bank was able to do it and willing to do it, and it really launched him into a great spot for a guy that was just starting out. He'd been in the business for 15 years, but he was just starting out on his own.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I often tell my guys, I go, you might not be, there aren't a lot of stories when you can say you were the one that sold the guy their first truck, and you've also were the one that sold them their last truck. Someone else usually sold them their first one, then a couple other guys sold them some in the middle, and then we're selling them now. But hey, they cheated on them to come to us. Doesn't mean that they won't cheat on us to go to someone else. So it's just like a relationship, if you're not with the one you love the one you're with. And there's enough truck dealers for them to love. That's for sure.
Yeah, I always say you're as good as your last birthday card.
Right, right, exactly.
So outstanding. Uh, I always like to end on a personal note. So, what does AJ Hewitson do when he's not selling drugs?
So work-life balance has been my struggle for the entire career of doing this, and it's tough because, you look at, the opportunities that are out there, and at some point you have to shut it down. So, I mean, I've got a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old, and, my 9-year-old son is, awesome. He's very, calculated, a little apprehensive, and just, he's very clinical. My daughter's crazy. So my daughter is me, and my son is more my wife. And so I'm working hard to spend, more time with them. And we shut down on the weekend, and
Sure.
we did biking and kites and fishing and, all kinds of, nature adventures. So we're, now as they're getting older, it's fun to, relive the stuff through them. Once again, COVID makes it tough. We
Yeah.
normally go to the zoo. I mean, we're in San Diego, so we've got amazing zoos and parks and
Oh
museums and
gosh,
stuff out
that's
here.
the world.
So it's just one of those things of, just hoping that things get back to some kind of normal sometime soon, so that we can, get back to doing that.
Oh, absolutely. It's funny. Uh, you talk about back to normal. I think all this has created some new normals.
Right.
Uh, More and more people have told me, gosh, I really had to get into technology that I've never been in before. I've had to be more organized. I've had to take a different approach to things.
I watched a podcast that you had. I think it was two things ago, where that you had a panel on, and one of the guys was saying, like, I'm really fortunate that I've really cornered the market in being digital, and not having a lot of competition. And he said, it's been great, but now a lot of these other dealers are realizing that with their doors closed, or like LA is most likely going to get shut down again.
Wow.
California, the whole state, could most
Yeah.
likely get shut down again. And, so if you can't see your customers and they can't see you, and it's not something that you could really demonstrate in a flyer that easily, the only way to do it is through video and digital and, Zoom calls and, whatever. So there's been a lot of other people that are coming out there. Now, there's a lot of people out there that are doing it poorly, stock photos,
Yeah.
and not doing, what they, but at the same time, there are some really smart people out there that are doing it right. And if you can meld, I mean, I guess going back to the, what could a manager do? If you've got anyone on your team that's, really good with that social aspect, and you're really good with all the experience and knowledge about the industry, you combine those two together, and then that's awesome.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of, veteran experience, and then there's, rookie experience that do go together. But check your ego, and I mean, you're gonna learn something, and God forbid you learn something and then it plus just builds morale with the team too, that they helped you learn something, and you help them learn something, and that, and then there's accountability. Once you taught them something, you can, go back and check and go, hey, so in that thing that we were working on, how many times have you put that into practice now? But then again, they could do the same to you also. So I mean, it goes both ways.
Yeah, that's you just described myself and Will Brogan.
Right.
Will is my millennial technical guy.
Right.
I've learned a lot. I mean, I'm continuing to learn, and
Right.
then I'm the relationship guy, and Will's doing a great job of that too. So AJ, how much longer are you and I going to do this?
I don't know. It's becoming more and more challenging and difficult, and as you do this more and you get more experience, I don't know. Like, I was just talking with one of the reps from Enterprise today, and she's been there for 20 plus years, and like I said, I've been doing this for 17, and I just said, what's your feeling around the office? And she's like, well, the new people have no idea what the good times were like, because they've only been here a short time. The veterans are seeing how tough it is right now, and how resilient you have to be to stay in it. And so I think that there's, I mean, good news, bad news. I think there's going to be a lot of attrition of the people that have been around for a while. There's going to be a great opportunity for the up and comers that want to take those roles, which this is a tough business to grow in. Yeah. You have to essentially just wait until someone dies or quits, and that's that's pretty much it. And they're going, and the management's there for a long time. So if someone's decent, then they're going to keep their job, and So just be sharp and take advantage of every opportunity, and follow up is definitely the key. Every day I'm hounding my guys on that. And
Absolutely.
why build rapport all over again with someone brand new when you've already had, 6, 7, 8 phone calls and emails and visits, and then you just let that opportunity die? It's like, I mean, they're going to respect you more, that you took no 7 times and it wasn't enough.
Yeah.
And if there's one piece to take away in relation to that, liken your efforts to their business and ask them how they got, like you talk about, ask them how they got started. Ask them, people love talking about themselves, and ask them how they got to where they are. Did they start on their own? Was their dad a plumber? Was their uncle a plumber? How did they get into electrical work? How did they get into, landscape architecture or whatever? Once you get them talking about themselves, then, they don't realize it, but they're just going to be bleeding out all the reasons and ways that you're going to be able to sell them. They're giving you the playbook, and they don't even realize it. And then, and the thing is that once you find that stuff out, then you can go after and you can attack it and work on it well. But, to build the rapport all over again is exhausting. But when a guy continues to say no to you, and you already know their story, especially their hard luck story where their first business partner embezzled the $100,000, and I've heard those stories forever. Like, they didn't pay payroll taxes, or they didn't do this, they didn't do that, and you go, man, remember back 20 years ago when you were just first starting out, and man, you were struggling, and this and that, and everyone kept telling you no, and whatever, and God, wasn't that hard? And like, yeah, it was really hard. And like, why are you doing it to me? And all I'm trying to do is just to try to help you out, and at the same time make a living for myself. And I'm sure you can appreciate what I'm trying to do. Help me understand why we haven't arrived at a deal. Is my price too high? I mean, it's never cheap enough. Is the truck too long? Is it too short? Is it too white? Is it too black? Tell me why. I mean, because there's got to be a reason, and then let's work through it. You don't want me to hound you, and I don't want to hound you. So, let's work together. And if you just don't like me, then I'll stop calling you. If it's a personality thing or whatever, then that's fine. I get that. It is what it is. But you can really, that's one thing I really do like about this business, is that we're selling to people that sell.
Yes. Thank you.
And so whether they realize that they're a salesperson or not, and if you ask them, give me the playbook on what I need to do right or better or more of or less of, most likely they'll tell you. But usually salespeople, they give them their number. If they don't bite off on it, then you're dead to me. And then they move on to the next one and start over again.
We pull a statistic that this is startling. Over 80% of salespeople never make a second call on the same prospect.
Yeah, we've had that conversation. I think I got it more finite. Like, it's been a while since I've pulled out the numbers, just because it's been a while since we've hired new people. But like 91. I think like so 70% will make a first phone call, or make a first contact, which means that 30% don't even make a contact. 39% make a second, 19% make a third, 9% make a fourth, and 5% make a fifth phone call. Well, most sales happen from the fifth contact and beyond.
Absolutely.
So if you're at the fifth call, if 95% of your competition has dropped out, or you're the stepping stone for somebody else. You go and see that person twice. They talk to one other person one time, and then the third person shows up. And once again, they think they're God's gift to sales because it's a one-call close, but they don't know the path that's been laid before them or the trailblaze that someone else did. And then inevitably, the first person comes back and does the you did because they bought from somebody else. He goes, where'd you go? And then the worst thing that a salesperson can say is, how come you didn't call me? And like, as those words leave your mouth, you want to like grab them and pull them back and go, because if the customer's, quick enough, they'd be like, how come you didn't call me? Why is it my responsibility to call you to follow up with you? But we just feel that we did a lot of work, that we become entitled to get that deal after we put the work in. But that's only just part of it. And it's frustrating. And once again, nobody's perfect. And you might quote someone today and they call somebody that same day and buy it somewhere else. And then you had no idea that they were that close, to buying. And then you miss out on the opportunity. So that happens too. It just is.
All the time. all the time. Well, thanks. Great words of wisdom. AJ, thank you. I know how busy you are. I know how valuable your time is. I so appreciate you being with us today.
No problem.
As always, let's let's stay in touch. We go back a long way.
Absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity, bud, and appreciate all that you've done for me and our team. And any way we can help, we're glad to do it.
Well, I've already come up with about 2 more ideas for more podcasts for you and I.
Watch what you wish for, I guess, is the moral. Or no good deed goes unpunished. The other 2 things.
You always have valuable information. I mean, we get good feedback on your stuff. Yeah, the podcast that you and I did was one of our most listened to, by the way.
Cool.
So good stuff. Hey, God bless you, my friend. Thanks so much. Appreciate you.
Have a good one, buddy.
All right.